So this run of Pokemon Infinite Fusion, the fan game with over 210,000 different Pokemon combinations, is going to be dedicated to my daughter Evie's favorite Pokemon. And it's none other than Ash's dad, Mr. Mime. Nobody made her light up more than Mime. So for this run, we're going to be doing a hardcore Nuzlocke using only Mr. Mime fusions. That means if a Pokemon faints, it's considered dead. The level cap is the next leader's ace. No active items can be used in battle, and we're going to be playing on set mode. As always, if you like the video, please make sure you show your support down below by liking the video, leaving a comment, and maybe subscribing. The more folks that subscribe to the channel means more people get to see it, means I get to take more time to make more content. But anywho, let's jump into it. Starting things off in Professor Oak's lab, we're going to take a quick look at our starters. And we start off with Venipede, Bastiodon, and Ho-Oh. Grabbing Bastiodon as our starter Pokemon, we're going to go ahead and fuse it up with Mr. Mime to get ourselves a Mr. Don. Then it's time for us to take on Rando in our first rival battle. But with our steel typing, there's not a whole heck of a lot that Rando can do to us, so we make pretty quick work of the Hopeed. And we're going to move on to make some new friends. I'm not exactly sure what's going on, but this Armando 100% exists, I think. A Pikachu over on Route 22. A Bewar. A Beware on Route 2. And a Dodrio in Viridian Forest. And now it's time for us to start fusing up our new friends. First up is Armaldo with Mr. Mime to get this, yeah, we got Mr. Alder now. Up next is Beware with Mr. Mime, and honestly, I absolutely love so many of these Beware sprites, and this is no exception. Next up, fusing with Pikachu is gonna get us our first time going for the fairy type with Pika-Mime. And this thing looks like it should be a mascot costume. And finally, fusing up with Dodrio, I love that we maintain the 3 distinct personality with these heads, and this is a great sprite. We find ourselves on Nidoking over in the Secret Garden. And then we receive a Gyarados as our Pikumuku. And our final encounter before facing off against Brock is a Wailzor. With that taken care of, it's time for us to face off against Brock and his fighting Pokemon. He starts off by sending this wicked Galvantzican in, and we send in Mr. Drio. Going for a ×4 effective peck, we go ahead and get ourselves the Yoko. Out next comes Pidcross, and we go ahead and get him down pretty deep into the yellow after a peck, and then we can follow up with a second attack for the KO. We run into Nurse Joy outside of Mount Moon, tending to this wounded Geodude. We lift up the little guy, giving it a firm, comforting embrace, and his wounds are healed miraculously. As Brock comes over to check things out, he can see that things are already taken care of, and Nurse Joy is so taken aback by our fatherly instincts that she rushes off with us. In Mount Moon, we're going to find ourselves a Joltik. At the back of Mount Moon, we run into Team Rocket doing a bunch of evil stuff with this triple fusion machine. After scolding Team Rocket and telling them to go to their room, they pack up all their stuff and leave, but then they leave some of the stuff behind, so we're gonna have to talk to their mother about that. We grab ourselves a Dome Fossil. On Route 4, we find ourselves a Raikou. Needing to make some changes to the team. First, we're gonna go ahead and fuse up Raikou with Mr. Mime to get ourselves a Mr. Koo. And while the design's pretty simple, I love his mustache. We run into Rando over Red Nugget Bridge holding 2 baseball gloves and a ball. He's looking longingly at them. He looks up at us. I ask him if he'd like to have a catch. Frustrated, he throws everything into the water, challenging us to a battle. His first Pokemon out is a Honrona against our Mr. Wares. We go ahead going for a Brutal Swing, as I'm not quite sure what this thing's typing is. After trading back and forth for a little bit and getting it down into the red, its Flame Bunny goes ahead and gets the burn on us, which is incredibly unfortunate as Rando goes ahead and heals up. After our burn activates our own battery, healing us back up a little bit, we need to swap out. Setting Mr. Aldo in at this point, he's used quite a few Fury Cutters, and once we get hit with a couple of them, we go down, losing our first Pokemon of the run. Swapping over to Mr. Drio, we go ahead going for a peck, doing basically nothing, so this thing is definitely fire and not bug, as a Pursuit comes in doing some pretty decent damage to us. Swapping out, sending in our Pika-Mine, we go ahead and take a little bit of chip damage from a Fury Cutter. Then after we go back and forth spamming between Thundershocks and Confusions, eventually we take down this little Sword Boy. Digria's out next, and this thing's hairdo is absolutely adorable. As a Magical Leaf goes and gets it down to about 50%, a Magnitude comes in, getting us down to just 12 HP. Needing to swap out, we go ahead and send in Mr. Drio, where we can follow up with a couple of pecks to take it down, but an Astonish does activate our berry. When Hopeed comes in, we go ahead going for a peck, followed by a quick attack. But after getting poisoned with his poison point and getting down into the red, we need to swap out, so we send in Mr. Koo. After trading back and forth with a couple of discharges and getting the paralysis off, ultimately we take it down. His final Pokemon Silsump comes in and it just starts screaming at us, but after a couple more hits, we manage to take it down and we defeat Rando. Cool, alright, we find ourselves a Meganium over on 24. Using up Meganium with Mr. Mine, we are going to get ourselves Mr. Needham. Next up, it's time for us to challenge Misty and her dragon Pokemon. She starts off with Biksu, and we send in Fred, and yes, I remember to nickname people. A Draining Kiss gets her down to about 50% as she heals up on the following turn. But after just 2 more, we take down the Biksu. When her Azugon comes in, a Draining Kiss doesn't do that much due to its poison typing, but we can follow up with a Confusion and absolutely annihilate it, earning our Cascade badge. On Route 5, we find ourselves a Silicon 2. We find ourselves a Bagon over on Route 6, and Banette over on 11. We run into Rando over in the SSM, where he says he's been working here to try to save up money for business school. He asks us if we're proud of him, and before I get a chance to let him know that I am very proud of him, he gets frustrated, challenging us to another battle. Sending out a Ponzi, Fred comes in going for a Brutal Swing, doing about 50%. On the following turn, we can go for a Brick Break, grabbing the KO. When Hopeheat comes in, all it takes is 2 Psybeams to take down his starter, which is going to lead into Printer. And yes, his name is Printer. I had to do like a quadruple take against this thing. Once again though, Psybeam, 1 and done. When his final Pokemon Gardevoir comes in, we go for 1 more Brutal Swing, getting the KO. Moving on to Lieutenant Surge, he's been randomized into a Bug Trainer. Starting off with Vintage Revius, we're going to go ahead and set in our Improv team. A Pluck does a massive amount of damage, getting him way down into the red as Lieutenant Surge heals up. Fortunately, we managed to break through the Stun Spore and grab the KO on the next turn. Mealigator comes in, we get it way down into the red before he ultimately heals up on the next turn. After being paralyzed for 1 turn, we go ahead and break through on the following turn, getting ourselves the KO. Lavron comes in last, and not only is this an amazing sprite, but since it's a rocket, it resists our attacks, so we go ahead and swap out, sending in Mustache. Going for a discharge, we manage to grab ourselves the Yoko and our Thunder Badge. We run into a Charizard over on Route 9, a Beedrill on 10, Ferrothorn in the Power Plant, Pikumuku in Rock Tunnel, a Dunce on Route 8, and a Remoraid on 7. And then to round things out, our Game Corner encounter is a Crocorock. And finally on 16, we grab ourselves an Inferntails. We're going to go ahead and take our Infernape and fuse it up with Mr. Mime to get ourselves this Infernmime. And this clown baby is, honestly looks kind of like Sweet Tooth. Skipping ahead to Saladon City, we run into Rando yet again, and this time he's beating up 2 Rockacross and doing a really great job. After he scares them off, I place 1 hand on his shoulder, and I look him deep into the eyes, and I tell him how proud of the man that he has become. With tears streaming down his face, Rando runs off into the distance, screaming, "I love you, Papa!" Oh god, is Rando my son in this one? After fighting our way through the sewers and Team Rocket's secret base, we find Giovanni. And it looks like he's taken Erika, the local gym leader, hostage. Somebody needs to put this bad boy in timeout. The battle starts off with Giovanni's Double Fuse Eevee, and I go ahead and send in Sweet Tooth going for a close combat, grabbing the Oko. Out next is Coral, and I absolutely love this design. And a Thunderbolt is all it takes. Mudreon's out next, so I go ahead and swap out, sending in Fred as he sets up a Bide. Swapping out again, sending in Clonosaurus, I go ahead and set up a Reflect because I want to avoid hitting this thing while it's using Bide. And after the Bide ends, I can go ahead and take it down after 2 magical leaves, defeating Giovanni and sending him to timeout. With Team Rocket taking care of us, now it's time for us to take on Erika and her ghost types. Her first Pokemon out is a Carphagia, and oh my god, this thing is an absolute monster. As an Ominous Wind comes in, smashing Fred down to 50%. A Brutal Swing does perfectly average damage to Carphagia as she goes ahead and swaps out into Driftmacue, and I send in Sweet Tooth. Knowing I can't risk an innards out on this one, I go ahead and do some chip damage with a couple of Draining Kiss before she ultimately heals back up. And after that heal up, I keep on spamming Draining Kiss until I can safely take it down, and Innards Out does basically nothing. Star Tomb comes out next, taking about 50% from my Thunderbolt, healing up with her Berry. A Swift does an insane amount of damage back to us as we go for another couple of Thunderbolts and take it down. Once Coffagia comes in, I need to swap out, so I do, sending in our Mustache. An Ominous Wind does about 50% to us, and I go for a Snarl, getting it below 50%. And after getting down to just 9 HP and getting it deep into the red, I need to swap out, so I go ahead and send in Fred, who gets slammed down below half with an Ominous Wind. Knowing there's nothing I can do here, and this thing could just absolutely OHKO all 3 of my remaining Pokemon, I go ahead and go for a Draining Kiss. And it uses Guard Split. It must have run out of Ominous Winds and can't hit me with anything else. But we take down the Coffagia and secure our Rainbow Badge. But it turns out it's not a Snorlax. It is, in fact, a Rotom. And we find Rhyperior over on Route 12. And then a Ponyta on 13. A Blissey over on 14. A Tyrannola on 15. A Skull on 18. And a Slackoth on 17. And a Slackoth on the Cycling Road. And a Tyranitar in the Safari Zone. Koga's been randomized into a fighting trainer, which I think kind of makes sense since he's a ninja master. Starting off with this Mimichan, we go ahead and send in Sweet Tooth. After a Draining Kiss breaks his disguise, we can go for a second one on the following turn, bringing him down pretty low, but not low enough for him to want to use a potion. And on the next turn, we take it down. Digferno comes in next, and this little guy's nose is absolutely adorable. He looks like he could be a clown too. Banley comes in looking at like it really wants to seduce me, and a Draining Kiss takes it down way into the red as Koga goes ahead and heals up on the following turn. But after just a couple more hits, we take it out. Dayrogue comes in last, and I love this guy's shirt, and one close combat finishes it off, securing our Soul Badge. Our Hitmonlee is randomized into a Houndoom. Giratina for saving everybody in Silph. Inside of Silph, we run into Rando yet again, who comes running and jumping into my arms, and I embrace my son. I tell him that I'm proud of him, that I love him. He asks if we can have a Pokemon battle, so I can see how much he's grown. I say, of course, Rando. Let her rip, buddy. Munchfoot comes in first, which is absolutely adorable, and we send in Sweet Tooth, going for a close combat, doing about 50%. It tries to set up a Belly Drum, but obviously this fails as we go for another close combat, grabbing the KO. Vigaian comes in next, and I go for a Flamethrower. After a second Flamethrower, we get it way down into the red and manage to get the burn off, which ultimately takes it down that turn. Towpuff comes in next, and I didn't realize Rando became a normal type trainer, but I swap into Fred, going for a Psychic, doing about 50%. Going for a takedown, it activates my Berry, doing a decent amount of damage to itself, and a Brick Break takes it down. Next out is Hopeed, and this thing absolutely slams me down to 16 with Sacred Fire, and it burns me. And after the burn, Fred only has 2 HP left. Thank Arceus. We go ahead and swap out, setting in our Improv team as it switches up things, going for a Fire Blast this time, activating our Berry. Going for a Fly, we bring it way down into the red as it follows up with an extra Sentry, doing a pitiful amount of damage, if I'm being honest, but one more Fly takes it out. Bulbusty comes out next and try to say that 5 times fast as we go for a Fly, and a Seed Bomb comes in doing quite a bit of damage, but we managed to take it down after one Fly after missing the first one, and we defeat Rando. I asked Rando if he's up for a father-son battle because I've heard that Giovanni has once again been a bad boy who needs to go to his room. Bursting into the Self-President's office, we go ahead and interrupt Giovanni's party, and a father-son bad guy double battle begins. Giovanni sends in Croaksure and Krokopi, and we go ahead and send in Fred as well as a Fantursa. Oh my god, look at her! A Draining Kiss does an okay amount of damage, but after both of them double into me, I'm forced way down into the red, activating my Berry. Not wanting to risk it, I go ahead and swap out, sending in this guy. They go ahead and double up into the Teddy, but fortunately it has set up a Destiny Bond, taking down one of Giovanni's Pokemon. I set up a substitute as Dragafree comes in. I'm not quite sure why Dragafree keeps insisting on using Agility, but I go ahead and just keep on doing some chip damage onto Led Jr. until eventually he heals it back up. When Dragafree decides to finally join the party, it uses a Dragon Tail, knocking out Croaksure, and sends in Clifflame. I swap in a Clonosaurus and completely forget that this thing has been spamming Bug Buzz the entire time, and my dinosaur gets taken out in just one shot. Setting in Sweet Tooth, they both double into me, activating my berry. And once I break free, I go for a flamethrower, taking out Lead Jr. When Crocsure comes back in, Dragon Free wakes up from its sleep and goes ahead and knocks it out. But then I get put to sleep. Swapping out an Improv team, this thing decided that wasn't quite fast enough yet. Once Improv team gets in there, all it takes is a couple of flies and we defeat Giovanni, ejecting them from Saffron City. We're going to go ahead and fuse up Mr. Mime with Giratina, and we are going to get ourselves marks. With Team Rocket taken care of, we can safely take on Sabrina and her psychic Pokemon. Her first Pokemon is a Lang, and I think that this thing is super cool. And it's definitely a reference to something, but I can't remember what right now. Anyways, after a Snarl does about 40% to it, I swap out, sending in Sweet Tooth, where I can follow with a Flamethrower, grabbing the KO. Flanks comes in next, and I absolutely love this design. It is an adorable little Jinx. After a couple of Thunderbolts, she goes ahead and heals back up with a Max Potion, and she starts spamming Last Resort, getting me way down into the red, activating my berry before I can finally take it down. Gassy comes in next, so I swap out into Marks, and it goes for a couple of hexes, getting me down pretty low. We then swap into Improv team, and after one fly, I can safely take down the Gassy. Lucario comes in last, so I go ahead and swap into Mustache, taking a couple of hits and getting knocked down way into the red before Sabrina ultimately heals back up. Swapping back into Marks, I can avoid a Mega Punch, and going for a couple of Earth Powers, grabs us the KO, and earns us our Marsh Badge. Alright, cool, we find ourselves in Oricorio on Route 21. Alright, we find an Oddish inside a Pokemon Mansion. Blaine's been randomized into a Flying Trainer, and he has quite the team setup. Starting off with a Victory Charge, we send in Mustache first. A Discharge from Mustache does a decent amount of damage and manages to get the Paralysis, which is nice. But what's less nice is a crit Razor Leaf, getting me down below 50% and activating my berry. Another hit from us gets it way deep down into the red, but following up with a Leaf Blade, Blaine gets us down to just 18 HP. Swapping out into Sweet Tooth, I take another decent hit from a Leaf Blade before we take it down with a Flamethrower. Gindactyl comes in next, and I don't know what this thing is, but I don't like it very much. A Body Slam does absolutely massive damage to us as we go for a couple of Thunderbolts, grabbing the KO. Reshiram is in. I don't know what to make of this thing. But since it's Dragon, we can just start using Draining Kiss on it, and after a couple of rounds, we've secured our Volcano Badge. And I hear we should check out Mount Ember. Over at Mount Ember, we run into Giovanni, who's been a very bad little boy. It turns out the Team Rocket's been working on a triple fusion machine, and with all the Master Balls that they stole from Silphco, they managed to capture all 3 Kanto legendary birds. By fusing them together and creating Zap Muno, Giovanni hopes to take over the entirety of the Kanto region. Sending in our Mustache against Zap Muno, I expect that a Discharge is going to do good damage to each of these guys, but when I do less than 50% to both Articuno and Moltres, I know that I am in an absolutely crummy spot. Fortunately, I get left with just 1 HP. Less fortunate, they set up a light screen. Knowing I can't afford to switch in anything, I go for another Discharge, getting Articuno and Moltres down pretty low before I ultimately go down. When Sweet Tooth comes in, I can go for a Thunderbolt on the Moltres, taking it out really easily. After Articuno heals up and Zapdos does a crazy amount of damage to me, I can then follow with a Flamethrower, getting Articuno down pretty low. After taking both their hits and only having 16 HP left, I go for another Flamethrower on Articuno, getting a KO, before I get taken out with a Thunderbolt. Setting in Marks, I go for a Will-O-Wisp on Zapdos before I get paralyzed by a Thunderbolt. Between the Hex and the Burn, I get him down into the red. Swapping Marks out and sending in this guy, I go for a Draining Kiss, getting Zapdos way into the red before Giovanni wastes his turn using a full heal. And after just one more turn, we take down Zap Muno, crushing Giovanni's plans for his Kanto takeover. Before we face off against Giovanni, let's go ahead and pick up our 3 legendary birds and see what we're rocking with. First, Moltres got randomized into a raid. Zapdos is a Chinchou. And then our Articuno was randomized into a Gengar. Picking up a couple more encounters, we find ourselves a Lamplurk in the Hidden Forest, a Ledler on Viridian River, And for your static encounter on the Viridian River, it's Diglett. Before facing off against Giovanni to rebuild our team, we're going to take our Tyrantrum, but using it up, we're going to get Mr. Trum. And this thing is a nightmare. And finally, we're going to go ahead and fuse up Chandelure with Mr. Mime to get ourselves a Chandelmime. Giovanni's been randomized into a Poison Trainer, and it's time for us to take him on for our 8th and final badge. When Switch comes in, we start off with our comments, going for an Earthquake, doing some pretty good damage, as an Aurora Beam comes in, doing almost 50% to us. On the following turn, Giovanni heals up, but this time we score a crit and the KO. Fly Raid comes in next, and I think this is another sprite that's trying to seduce me. It starts an Uproar, activating our berry, and we go for an Earthquake, getting it way down into the red. After another round of Uproar, we're down to just 31 HP before we manage to get the KO. Nidoance comes in next, and knowing I'm faster than this thing, I can safely use another Earthquake, grabbing the KO. Eggmoth's up next, so I swap into our Improv team, and going for a Fly, we manage to get it way down into the red on the first hit. Giovanni then uses 2 full restores, as he then goes ahead and swaps out into Rillaboom, where we quickly take it out with a quick attack. Eggmoth comes back in, and after we connect with a couple of flies, we take it down, defeating Giovanni. Rounding out our last couple of encounters in Victory Row, we grab a Metapod, and Entei is randomized into a Trubbish. Needing to make some adjustments for the team, first we're going to go ahead and fuse out Gengar with Mr. Mime to get ourselves Mr. Gar. Next, we're going to go ahead and fuse Rotom up with Mr. Mime, and look at Romime. Using Slacking up with Mr. Mime is going to go ahead and net us this silly Mr. King. And for our final Pokemon, we're going to go ahead and fuse up Tyranitar with Mr. Mime for this happy Mr. Guitar. Alright, we got our Mimes set. And it's time for us to take a look at our team before we head in to the Elite Four. Starting things off first, we have Comments with Crunch, Earthquake, Rock Slide, and Dragon Claw. Next up, we have Fred with Psychic, Draining Kiss, Brutal Swing, and Brick Break. Next is Panic with Shadow Ball, Thunderbolt, Dark Pulse, and Psychic. Next up is Marks with Earth Power, Hex, Will-O-Wisp, and Draining Kiss. Clowny King with Strength, Slay Rough, Power Up Punch, and Brick Break. And finally, Gelatar with Earthquake, Crunch, Ice Fang, and Rock Slide. First up in the Elite Four is going to be Lorelei and her Ghost Pokemon, and I think this is only fitting considering Cold Spots and Cold Breath and all that stuff that's associated with ghosts and pop culture. But anywho, Cofferglit's her first Pokemon, and this thing is absolutely adorable, and I send in Panic, going for a Dark Pulse, getting it way down into the red. Lorelei then uses both of her full restores, and then we manage to take it down after just a couple more hits. Genro is up next, and this is an absolutely insane sprite. I love it. Meowmeowgis is up next, using a Night Slash, getting us down to just about 50% as we go for just a single Dark Pulse for the KO. Her final 2 Pokemon also go down pretty quickly, with her tree managing to break our berry beforehand. And we're moving on to Bruno. There we go. Bruno's been randomized into a fighting trainer, and I think he, more often than anybody else in all the randomized runs I've done, refuses to not be a fighting trainer. And Ufla is his first Pokemon, and we start off with Panic again. And I honestly think maybe he should consider a different typing, because I outgo every single one of his Pokemon with a Psychic, which means Agatha's up now. And maybe she just traded teams with Lorelei, because she's an Ice trainer now, which once again, Ice, Ghosts, they go hand in hand. Gardevile's up first, and while Dark Pulse does a decent amount of damage, it does put us to sleep, so we're forced to swap out, sending in Clowny Kong. Agatha heals up her Pokemon, and then I decide to use Power Up Punch a few times to increase my attack. She then swaps into Delitile, who gets knocked down way into the red on our first hit, so I follow up with a Strength on the following turn, KOing it. Next up is GlamQ, and I go for a Power Up Punch, hoping that I don't KO it, and fortunately for me, I only do about 60%. And after healing up with my berry, I can safely KO it on the following turn. And now that I'm at +3, the rest of Agatha's Pokemon go down in one shot apiece, and our final challenge lies with Lance. I lead the Elite Four. You can call me Lance, the Steel Trainer. You know that Steels are mythical Pokemon. They're hard to catch and raise. But their powers are superior. Technology is better than the past. You will feel the fury of the future. Manitou comes in first up against Jollitar. I try to go for an Earthquake, but apparently this thing is flying as it comes in with a Meteor Mash, smashing us for about 30%. In kind of a crummy spot here, I decided to go for a Crunch, this time doing a lot more damage, but a Meteor Mash knocks me down to just 25 HP before our Berry comes in for some spot healing. Swapping out into March, Lance uses his second full restore to heal back up, and I go for a Will-O-Wisp. With his attack cut down, I swap into Clowny Kong, going for a power-up punch. I get knocked down way into the red, activating my Berry, but I just keep on using power-up punches to get as many stat boosts as I possibly can until the Meta-New finally goes down. Next up is his Haunsis, and I knock it way down into the red on the first turn, where I can follow up on the second turn, getting the KO. Lance's next two set of swords don't stand a chance against me as I KO them both in quick succession, but when Meta Revenant comes in, I don't expect it to outspeed me, going for a Meteor Mash, KOing my Clowny Kong, and getting the attack boost. Setting in Fred, I go for a couple of Brutal Swings, doing some really good damage, getting it down to just like 1 HP. But a Meteor Mash comes in absolutely decimating Fred too. No! Assuming Gengar might be faster than a Trevenant, I guess I was wrong. Setting in Jollitar, assuming that this is just done, he finally misses a Meteor Mash, and I can follow up with an Earthquake for the KO, and we are moving on to Rando by the skin of our teeth. We meet Rando at the back of the Champion Chamber, and I'm so proud of him for becoming the Pokemon League champion. Nothing could make a father prouder. But Rando, you're 10 years old. There's no way in heck I'm gonna let you beat me. I'm sorry, dude. We have to do this. Victory Champs his first Pokemon in, and we send in Jollitar. Going for an Ice Fang, we do a decent amount of damage, as he then goes for a Leaf Storm, getting us to just about 50%. After using his first full restore, 2 more Ice Fangs get Victory Champ way down into the red as a Razor Leaf crits, activating our own Berry. Rando then heals up a second time, and we swap into Comments, where we can tank a Leaf Storm like nothing. After getting in a couple of good hits with Razor Leaf, he then heals up again, and our Berry gets activated as well. After getting him down low just one more time, Rando heals up yet again before we ultimately take it down. Zekler's his next Pokemon, and at this point I just assume the entire run is done, as a Dragon Claw comes in, KOing Comments. Down to just 2 Pokemon, I send in Marks, as a Fusion Bolt does about 30% to us. We set up a Will-O-Wisp, and then a Zen Headbutt comes in, doing barely anything to us, fortunately. Another Zen Headbutt activates our Berry as we go for a Drain Kiss, doing about 50%, and we heal up quite a bit. And after getting hit with another Fusion Bolt, we take it down after another Smoochie Kiss. With Hope Heat out next, it goes for a Fire Blast, and I try to use Will-O-Wisp, but obviously this thing is fire, you dum-dum. After getting punished, we go for an Earth Power, doing some pretty big damage to the Hope Heat, and on the following turn, he swaps out, sending in Kiss. A Discharge does a decent amount of damage to us, and I go for the Burn. Another Discharge gets us down to just 38 HP, and it gets the Paralysis, but thanks to Draining Kiss, we're able to stay alive long enough to take it down with the Burn. Hope Heat comes back in, misses a Fire Blast, and an Earth Power manages to take it down. Miss Gregius is his next Pokemon, and after just a couple of rounds, our Marks goes down, and we are down to just Jollitar. After 2 crunches, we manage to get the KO, and his final Pokemon, Magnetrus, comes in. And it's all on this. I go for an Earthquake, and I don't get the KO, but Discharge leaves me with 30 HP. So after one more Earthquake, we KO Rando's final Pokemon. And by the skin of our teeth, we become the Pokemon League champion. And that is how I beat a hardcore randomized Nuzlocke of Pokemon Infinite Fusion using only Mr. Mime fusions. If you liked the video, please make sure to show your support by liking it, commenting, subscribing, all that other fun stuff. And also, it's my daughter's birthday, so come on, do it for her. She deserves it. But anywho, I'll catch you all in the next run. See you later.